We just wrapped up the contact info section of the contact page and got it nice and set up with the borders for the pattern that we wanted from the design file. Now let's move on to the actual main functionality of a contact page, allowing the user to enter their information and send us a message. So we'll be handling user input in this video. So we'll start off by using a new component, the Material UI text field. Let's head on over to the code editor and get started. Alright, so here I am in contact.js. Let's start off at the top by importing. We'll import the text field from @material-ui/core/text field and make sure you have the capitalization set correctly with a capital T and capital F. So now we can go ahead and we'll find here is our container that is wrapping the contact us item and the send message items. So let's go in between these two grid items. And we'll add another grid item, and then we'll have this wrap a grid container direction of column that's going to hold all of our text fields. Inside of here, we're going to end up having 4 text fields. So we'll go ahead and create a grid item wrapping a text field component, and that's a self-closing component. So let's go ahead and copy this and paste that 3 more times, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 text fields. We'll probably revisit this later in the course and kind of go through and do optimizations and really clean this up in a more concise way, but that'll require a little more trickiness, so I kind of want to wait on that until later. So the first thing is we want all these text fields to be the same width. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's give these a classes prop for the root class of the text field. And we'll specify the classes.text field. We can just call it the text field class and go ahead and copy this onto each of our items here. All right, now we can come up, create our text field class in the style object, and let's go ahead and give these all a width of 30 rem. So if I just go ahead and save that, flip back to the browser, check that out. We've got these 3 lines here representing our, or 4 lines rather, representing our 4 different text fields. Now obviously the styling we're going to have to work on, but we're off to a right track. You see we can enter text into all of these, so it is working. All right, but let's keep sharpening these up. If we go down, let's give each of the text fields accepts a placeholder. Placeholder prop. And this is some text that we want to be displayed before the user types anything in. That way they know what field it actually is. So the first one, let's give it a placeholder of name. And I'll just go ahead and copy this. The second one, we'll give it the email. The third one is going to be phone number. And the fourth one is going to be the message. So we save that, flip back on over. Let's refresh the page, and you can see that now once we start typing that goes away, but if we don't have anything in there, we see the placeholder. Let's keep working, and the message input is actually going to be, if you remember from the design file, it's not just going to be a single line. We want the user to make sure that they can enter as long as a message as they want. And actually, I believe that there's studies that have shown that the size of the input actually correlates with the size of the message sent. So even though if we made this take unlimited number of characters, since it's a small line, the user is going to enter short messages on average. So we can go ahead and for this last text field that our message is going to go into, let's also give it the prop multi-line. So this will be more than one line, but let's also set a fixed number. And this doesn't mean that it can only be this number of rows, but it just means that once you exceed this number of rows, it will just start to scroll within the box instead of extending the field. All right, so if we go ahead and enter the rows prop and give it 8 rows, we can save that, flip back on over, and you see that we now have a larger message field. So now we're going to need to be able to actually see what the user is typing in here. We're going to need access to that value. So there's a concept with inputs between a controlled input and a uncontrolled input. All right, so right now these are uncontrolled inputs. We can just go ahead and type in whatever we want, and that's not really tied to anything within our application. It's just storing that info inside the DOM. All right, so I'm going to refresh to clear that out. But if we want to make these controlled inputs to where our application can actually control the value inside of it, we need to use a piece of state to store what the user is typing in. All right, so let's go ahead and up at the top, let's destructure out use state from the React import. And we'll go ahead and now under our const of classes, we can create constant of name and set name. So the value that the user is typing into the name field and a function to set that value equal to the use state called and will default to an empty string. Let's go ahead and paste 3 more of those. This one will be for email and set email, and then phone number and set phone number. And then we'll go ahead, message and set message. All right, so now we can control these text fields by setting the value prop. And the value is going to be equal to the piece of state that we created. So now if I go ahead and just save that, and I flip on over to the name field and I start trying to type in, well, look at that, nothing happens. That's because the value that we passed in is our piece of state of name, and that's just an empty string. So we have to actually tell it to update the piece of state based on what the user is typing in with set name. So we can go ahead and under value, we need to add the onChange function. And this is going to be called every time the user makes a change within the text field. So adding a letter or character or removing one, and that is going to be a arrow function, and that's going to be called with the event. Okay, and then we will set the name to that event.target.value. All right, so now if I go ahead and save, we can go ahead, type into the field, and it works again, but now it's being controlled by a piece of state. So we'll go ahead and do the same thing here for each of these values, or each of the text fields rather. Go ahead and this will be a value of email, and then we'll call set email. This will be the phone number, and we will set phone number, and then we'll go ahead and this will be our message, and we will set message. All right, so if we go ahead and save that, now all of our fields are controlled by pieces of state, and we can get access to that field whenever we need to do validation, which we'll do in a couple videos, and then when we actually need to send that information. Now, one thing to note about actually sending this form, which we are going to do, however, the way that we're actually going to submit this form to where we receive the message is going to be through how we deploy our application. All right, there's going to be a really nice and easy way based on the deployment setup that we use using Netlify that is going to allow us to wire this form up to automatically send us the form submission without actually having to add a lot of custom logic. All right, so we're not going to be submitting it yet. We're going to have to do that after we deploy our project, which we will do at the end of the course. So stick around for that.